Hi, welcome to My Mom Thinks I'm Cool, a channel where we share the art that we love, be it film, television, or music. And this week we are going to be discussing Krzysztof Kieślowski's The Decalogue. Graeme, why don't you start by telling us why we decided to go through this?
Well, this is a very well-regarded miniseries that is from Poland in the 1980s, and it's called The Dekalog because it's a 10-part miniseries, so separated into 1-hour episodes, and each episode is kind of loosely thematically tied to the 10 Commandments. Hence it's called the Dekalog, and all the stories take place in a 1980s Polish apartment complex.
Yeah, and so we thought for this episode, we've watched all 10 of the episodes, or you can kind of think of them as their own 1-hour short films.
Yeah.
That we would pick our top 3, each of us, and go through it. And it's going to be a surprise to each other, too, as we count down our top 3 favorite Decalogue episodes. So Graeme, what is in spot number 3 for you?
So first of all, I'm going to qualify this that the episodes of the Decalogue are quite dour in tone, generally speaking. Yes, it's a 1980s Polish setting, but it's dealing with some heavy themes, you know, the ethical and moral dilemmas facing people as they kind of sort of relate to the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. So I picked Decalogue 10, which is the last of the 10 episodes in the miniseries, because it has more of a comedic tone, and I really like that. It sets itself apart from the majority of the other episodes in terms of tone. I wouldn't necessarily call it comedic, but it's kind of more black comedy.
Yeah.
And it centers on 2 brothers who are very, very different. One brother is in a punk rock band, living this kind of carefree rock and roll life, while the other brother is more straight-laced, wears a suit and tie. But they don't really have a lot in common, but they come together because their father just passed away, and he has this very, very extensive stamp collection that's actually worth a lot of money, surprisingly. So they become sort of obsessed with stamps themselves, even though they had zero interest while their father was alive. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sort of based on the commandment that thou shalt not covet. So it kind of follows the course of their increasing obsession with stamps, mm-hmm. you know, based on the fact that they are worth quite a lot of money. And it kind of brings the 2 brothers who are very different together. And that's really the important theme. And I really liked that. And I liked that it set itself apart from kind of the dourness of the other episodes. So that's why I liked it.
Yeah, I liked number 10 a lot, too. I enjoyed what the last scene of the whole Decalogue is that you get from episode 10, which, as you said, a lot of them can be, you know, really heavy and quite sad. And this one, I really, really liked that end scene. So,
you're number 3.
Yeah, so my 3rd spot goes to Decalogue episode 1. I think that he starts off his series with a really wonderful episode that is, you know, looking at not having a false god is sort of the loose theme of it. And it has to do with science and trying to predict things through science. This is definitely an episode that is a lot heavier and tragic in tone, but it's very powerful, and I think it really gets you into wanting to continue to watch the series. So again, I think he started it off really strong with episode 1, and it kind of haunts you once it's over.
Yeah, I agree that episode 1 really sets the tone for the series, and it really sets it off on a strong note. And it's haunting. It's definitely haunting. Mm-hmm. Definitely in the running for my top 3. Yeah, really, really gets it started on the right foot, I think. It's a really powerful episode.
Yeah. So what's your pick for number 2?
For number 2, I'm going to go with Decalogue 8. And Decalogue 8 focuses on a story from the Holocaust So it's actually an ethics professor, and remember that these episodes focus on ethical and moral dilemmas, and this particular story actually came from a real episode in someone's life who was known to the filmmaker. And basically it's an ethics professor who used to help children escape the Holocaust in Poland. And what happened, and it's basically based on the Ten Commandment that thou shalt not bear false witness.
But it's an interesting play with it, and as you were saying, a dilemma you would face with it.
Yeah, and I like, the paranoia and the uncertainty during that time meant that there was so many ethical dilemmas that were happening all the time. People were trying to do the right thing under, terrible circumstances where, one false move would get them caught by the Gestapo and executed, and, people trying to do right in those terrible circumstances, which obviously led to a lot of ethical considerations. And I just think it's really emblematic of what the series is trying to do well. And I think for a movie, for a miniseries that's set in Poland, you had to have one episode that dealt with the Holocaust, and I thought that it was really well done.
Yeah, it's interesting because my spot number 2 is the same episode 8, and partly for me is actually because I found it to have a hopeful ending as well. And even though when it begins you don't necessarily think it's going to lead there, I did find that it had some hope in it, while some of the other episodes it just doesn't really feel like that when the episode ends. And I really enjoyed the performances of the 2 main actresses that were featured in this episode. I think that their performances were really strong and added to everything that the filmmaker was doing in the one episode. So yeah, definitely Dekalog 8 I think is one of the strongest in the series.
Absolutely.
So now we're down to our favorite episode, spot number 1. Graeme, who takes it for you?
For me, it's Decalogue 5, which focuses on the 10th commandment that thou shalt not kill, and it really looks at the ethical dilemma of the death penalty, and kind of the cycle of trauma and violence that can occur in any society. And, it focuses on someone who's condemned to die for a terrible crime, and his lawyer who opposes the death penalty is trying to get his client's sentence overturned. It's just a really, really powerful episode. And I think the filmmakers noted that it was a powerful episode because they actually turned it into a full-length 84-minute cinema film.
Yeah, so once again, it's kind of interesting, but I feel like you probably already knew this, but I think the masterpiece of the whole series is episode 5. It is remarkably strong, so much so that when it was like at a critical moment of it near the end, I burst into tears, burst into them, not just little tears, but it just was almost uncontrollable. And I think that the way he handles looking at that commandment, thou shalt not kill, is really, interesting and still unfortunately relevant, because there are still many places that have the death penalty. And it's not the sort of thing that's taking an easy way out with looking at the death penalty. It's not saying it's because the guy is innocent, and I'm not really giving anything away because you know that very quickly, because that is definitely one issue with that topic, but he gets more into why it's still bad even if someone was guilty. And yeah, it's really very powerful, very moving. Definitely, to me, the highlight of the whole series is episode 5.
Okay, so we agreed on a couple of them.
Yeah.
So there were some standouts. Some of them weren't as good as others. I mean, it is 10 very different stories, even though they're kind of thematically tied. What would you rate the Decalogue overall?
Yeah, that's I think overall, I like the experiment of looking at each of the commandments and then thematically linking them. I liked the linking with the one apartment complex, so you actually have stories that slightly overlap, just slightly. We also didn't mention there's one actor who plays this like unnamed character who always shows up in most of the episodes.
In critical moments.
And he's just observing it, so it's almost like this other being seeing what's happening, where I really liked the use of that. So it is very moving, very powerful, but at the same time we took our time watching it. I don't think it's something you have to binge and watch 10 nights, an episode a night. I think it's better if you allow yourself some time to sit with each film and just let it unravel itself for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we actually purchased this, the initial idea was to watch one episode a month, but we kind of stretched it over like 3 years. And it is something. They are very heavy. So like when you watch an episode, you do need to sit with it, and it's not something that you're like, oh man, I really want to put on another one of those Dekalog episodes and get the dour. Let that dourness just take me away. It's not escapist entertainment per se. Yeah. But I really appreciate the ambition and what the filmmaker was trying to say with it, and I think it's rightly seen as one of the greatest miniseries ever made, and really worth checking out.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, think of it when you have an essay collection. For you personally, some essays are stronger than other essays. And for other people, I'm sure that maybe the episodes I like the least may speak the strongest to them. You just don't know. And that's why it's really good to watch the whole thing, even if you hit an episode that you're like, I didn't really like that one or something. So we definitely recommend checking out the Dekalog. Thanks so much for tuning in to My Mom Thinks I'm Cool. I'm Kim.
And I'm Graeme.
Bye.
Bye.